My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
And speaking of not knowing what you're going to get, this is the first episode, I think, Mary, where we actually don't know what films we're talking about.
That's very true. This is a very special episode because it's Mother's Day today.
Yay!
We're recording this on March 22nd, and as it's Mother's Day, we're doing a special episode for our mums. Literally, we've spoken to our mums and got them to pick 3 movies that we're going to talk about. And we have only told each other one of those movies. So we've got 2 surprises coming up.
It's an experiment, to say the least.
It is.
So what's on the agenda then for today? We're going to start by talking about our lovely mums and what kind of viewers they are, what kind of films they like, things like that. Then we're going to go through the films that have been chosen for us. We're going to review them. We're going to talk about them. And at the end, we're also going to adapt our usual recommend a film to recommend a film specifically for our mums. So, yeah. One thing I'm going to say is if you're listening on YouTube, if you look down in the description box, you should be able to find timestamps of where we talk about each film. So if you want to skip ahead or you want to jump to a particular film, by all means, I shall do that for you in this episode.
Okay. What type of films does your mum like or dislike? And why is that?
Now, I couldn't tell initially whether this was going to be extremely difficult to pin down. But we have spoken, and actually, no, I think it's much clearer now. So my mum is quite diverse genre-wise, I would say, but very selective of the films that are within those genres. I think there's only a handful of films that she actually ever raves about, which is why it always seemed like she had quite a small filmography.
Yeah.
But one thing that I've noticed is that films tend to usually have to have a true story element, or at least a believable plot, or some kind of emotional pull for them to work for her. They have to be quite effective. So lots of war films, historical films and dramas, but also a lot of sort of musical and family and animated sort of films. So we're talking anything from Gladiator, Dunkirk, Where Eagles Dare, those kind of things, Girl Interrupted, The King's Speech, Phantom of the Opera, Hairspray, Les Mis, The Greatest Showman, Paddington. So it is quite broad-reaching actually, but there are some genres that are complete no-goes. So anything that's sci-fi or fantasy or horror, anything that's not real, anything that's made up, I think my mum's just haven't got time for that. And I guess rom-coms as well. Although like there are some on her shelf because she's a big fan of Colin Firth, who just happens to be in so many of them. I don't think she really likes sort of soppy drivel kind of things like that. One thing that I find quite funny is that when it comes to picking a favourite film, it seems like almost every new film that she sees becomes a new favourite. And I think that's probably because it's the freshest in her mind. So recently we've had Mary Poppins Returns was her favourite, then The Lion King was her favourite, and then Joker was her favourite. So I don't think she really has a favourite film. One thing I think is hilarious, I think you'll find this funny. My mum claims to have a problem identifying people's faces. And she stands by that this is a legitimate thing, and I think it probably is. She can't tell characters apart very well or actors apart. So you could put, I don't know, like Will Smith and Morgan Freeman side by side, and she'll still think one of them's Judi Dench. So, yeah, famously in my house, she couldn't tell anybody with a beard apart in Lord of the Rings.
Makes it a hell of a lot more complicated.
I guess so. I know they're both wizards. I guess where you and my mum would differ is that sometimes, especially songs, I think songs can ruin films for her, especially if like they've been overplayed. So she does not really like My Heart Will Go On from Titanic. She does not like Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
That is a
like
classic.
Wow, I think she's got a low tolerance for songs that are overplayed, you know, where they're everywhere.
I'd say you're probably quite similar then, in that respect. I think you've got a bit of that as well. I think you might have inherited that. Yeah, you go against the hype.
Yeah, no, I guess so. But in terms of how many films she watches, I wouldn't say she watches that many, really. Saying that though, she has listened to the podcast every single episode.
Oh wow.
She made a New Year resolution to watch more films, and she's watched The Favourite. She watched Never Look Away on my recommendation, and I reckon there's probably dozens and dozens more films out there that are right up her street. But it's just finding them, I think. If she doesn't fall asleep during them, because that's also happened quite a lot.
Oh.
So sort of easy to sum up, but at the same time quite hard to pin down specifics. I think she'll have to let me know whether I've done that well or
I'm
not.
sure she will.
It's like, well, he doesn't know me very well at all. What about you then?
My mum's is quite hard to pin down, I think, though it's quite stereotypical as well in certain ways. So it's probably the same as you. There's certain things that are you can pinpoint all the time, but then there's other things that you just like, okay, I thought she'd like that, but she doesn't.
Yeah.
So she's got a few genres that she'll probably go to, but anything that's a drama, she would probably give it a go. She does like the odd musical, but not all of them. She's probably more classic. So she introduced me to like Rodgers and Hammerstein, The King and I, and The Sound of Music, and South Pacific, and things like that, which she'd been introduced to by her mum. But I wouldn't say that she's a big fan of new musicals. Like she loves ABBA, but Mamma Mia she thought was stupid. So
I should have mentioned my mum loves Mamma Mia.
Yeah, no, my mum doesn't have a lot of time for Mamma Mia. She thinks it's silly. Which pretty much sums her up really. She does think a lot of things are silly. So she loves a revenge story. So anything where somebody gets their own back. So her famous story would be Pretty Woman, when she goes back into the shop with her shopping and says, "You work on commission, right?" Big mistake. Big, huge. She does that all the time.
I have to go shopping now.
She loves that scene because she's getting her own back. So anything like that, she loves. So Scent of a Woman, she really likes that because Al Pacino stands up for the character at the end and it's this massive speech and she loves that. But then she likes other things like Dirty Dancing, and she's got a few different things from different genres that she likes, but I'd say most of what she watches is probably old. She does watch new films occasionally. She's not like a big film watcher. She absolutely hates fantasy, anything with magic. She's never seen Star Wars. She's never seen Harry Potter. She thinks fantasy's silly. She doesn't like anything like that. Horror, she will give some of them a go. I think she's more supernatural. So like The Exorcist was a big one for her. She wouldn't let me watch that till I was about 16 because she said it was horrifying.
Yeah. Now you see, anything with kids in, anything with scary kids in is a no-go for my mum, ever since Poltergeist.
She wouldn't let me watch that until I was older either. And then when I actually watched both of them, I was like, this is not scary. And she went, yes, well, when it came out. So The Exorcist is a big one on her list. So yeah, so there's that. She doesn't really have a go-to actor or actress, really. I would say that she really likes Jack Nicholson, but I wouldn't say she has a person she'd go, right, I have to see their films. But she should maybe watch like one every couple of weeks, possibly. It's very occasional. So yeah, she's a funny one to pin down, really.
Fair enough. So that's a profile of our mothers as film viewers.
I think we might get into trouble for some things that we've said.
I don't know. No, I don't think
Well,
so.
you might. Your mum listens. My mum doesn't listen to podcasts. She doesn't know how to work them. So
she'll have to listen to this one.
My sister will listen and she'll tell her, and then I'll get hounded.
Get the feedback. Okay, then. So we should probably get started.
So you're starting, Matt. What's your first film to review?
Yes. It's unusual, really, because I didn't mention comedy in the types of films that my mum watches, but this seems to be a bit of an exception. My first film that was recommended to me is one of my favourites as well. It's The Full Monty.
I have not seen that.
What?
I know. I'm British and I haven't seen it. I know.
I can't believe that. I was relying on you.
I'm sorry.
Okay. We're about to find out about it. So this came out in 1997, and it was directed by a director that I hadn't heard of. His name's Peter Cattaneo. He's only made about 6 films, and he's just most recently done the Military Wives film.
Yes, that's
which
right.
is quite similar in a way. To this, and it's also the first feature-length original screenplay by a man called Simon Beaufoy, who later wrote and won a lot of awards for Slumdog Millionaire. He did
right.
127 Hours, Battle of the Sexes, things like that. So, yeah, for me, The Full Monty belongs to a very exclusive group of films, like British films, low budget ones, most of which happen to be set in the north of England, that just have this perfect balance of drama and comedy, and they just excel at both of them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take sort of a slightly different approach to reviewing this one, because it is very much a comedy, but I think it's also got a lot to say, and obviously I'll try to keep it, no spoilers really, everyone knows what happens in the end, but so what happens is the film starts actually with some footage from a real promotional film for Sheffield, like a tourism kind of thing back from the early 1970s, bearing in mind the film's set in the then present day 90s. It's like selling the booming culture of Sheffield, the modernity of it all. It's a centre for commerce, and all because of the steel industry, the factories and the mills. And it's like the heart of the industrial north. But then we cut to 25 years later, and everything is run down. Factories and warehouses are empty and abandoned. Everything's sort of come to a standstill, and that's the backdrop that the film is set against. So we've got the main character, who's called Gaz, played by Robert Carlyle, who is brilliant. I think everyone loves Robert Carlyle.
Yeah.
But he's a bit down on his luck, to say the least. He is hundreds of pounds behind on his child maintenance support payments. He's desperate to be able to continue to see his son, so he's fighting for joint custody with his ex-wife. I think he's sort of stuck in this vicious cycle, and it's very clear at this point that the film is actually quite bleak. Before anything's really happened, it's not the nicest of setups, and all of the main characters, I'll explain how they get involved in a minute, they're all unemployed. They're all on job seekers allowance. They have no other choice but to spend their days down at the job centre or the job club. As a result of all the steel mills closing, they lost all their jobs, and it's just clear that there aren't any jobs out there for them. So I guess despite what you know about the film being a comedy, the themes are actually really deeply serious, and all the characters are depressed and insecure and embarrassed about their situation, demoralized, emasculated. They just feel obsolete. The main character, Gaz, is struggling to retain his rights as a father. His best friend, Dave, who's a massively underrated actor, Mark Addy, struggles with his body image and sort of, impotence, things like that. Their ex-boss, who also lost his job, is too ashamed to tell his wife that he's been out of work for 6 months, and it's plunged them into masses of debt. Another character we meet as he's attempting to commit suicide. So I think the themes are kind of forgotten, in the overall legacy of the film. We think of the comedy side. So the plot basically is, after Gaz sees how successful a touring sort of Chippendale style dance troupe is with the women of the community, he decides that that's the only way, that's the last resort, and he enlists this group of similarly unemployed friends and colleagues and some extra men that they audition, convinced that they'll be able to do it better. And if you think £10 a ticket, if you sell 200 tickets, that's £2,000, and it will pay the debt that he owes on his child maintenance support.
Yeah.
So that's his dream. But they're going to go one step further and bear all and do the full Monty, which is obviously naked. And they've only got 2 weeks to master it. So what follows is hilarious. One of the funniest British films ever written. And no surprise that it's on my mum's favourites list, because I think it should be on everybody's favourites list. And it's just sort of iconic. I know you haven't seen it now.
I will do my best to get to it very soon.
But I'm sure you would have, like the scene in the job centre where they're all in the queue lining up for their job seekers allowance, and on the radio Donna Summer comes on, and you can see them all practicing their moves in the queue. And Mark Addy's character in particular is just legendary. He's got some of the best one-liners. For example, commenting that anti-wrinkle cream there may be, but anti-fat bastard cream there is none. And there's a scene where he can't sleep knowing what he's committed to, and he goes and sits outside in the shed, wraps his belly in cling film, and then opens a Mars bar. It's it's a weird sort of funny, sad.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's something that some British films are really capable of doing, and they do it well.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit like it's got Billy Elliot vibes, where it's remembered for other things, but it actually does have a lot of very serious themes to it.
Yeah, that period of time, like the 80s and 90s, for some communities, obviously following Margaret Thatcher, and where communities were kind of broken, it's definitely set against that. But part of the appeal is that you really want things to turn around for them. They're all underdogs, but you root for them.
Yeah.
And you want them to succeed, and part of that is the raising of the money to hire the venue, the rehearsals, that they go through, and as you can imagine, they're not the best, and they don't claim to be the best, but as much as it seems like a long shot, you really want them to get through it and succeed, and it's strangely inspirational in that sense because you can sort of turn your fate around, and like I said, I won't spoil the ending, but it's not a bad ending. And I guess, ultimately what you get is a brilliant feel-good film, and in no way is that hindered by an amazing soundtrack. All the classic seduction songs, Hot Chocolate, Tom Jones, Donna Summer, as I said, and they're all given like a brand new twist when you pair them with these quite unlikely dancers. And the score itself is a really fun, sort of cheeky, sort of like a harmonica saxophony theme, something that shouldn't work on paper, but it really does. I guess that's kind of a bit like the plot of the film as well. So yeah, I love The Full Monty. It's one of my favourites. But I thought I'd just finish by saying here's some statistics that I think might blow you away, and I hope that will make you want to see the film even more. It was made on a very small budget of £3.5 million, but it grossed over £250 million internationally. It became the highest grossing film ever in the UK at the time, surpassing the likes of Jaws, Star Wars, E.T. and Jurassic Park that held the record before it. Obviously, Titanic came in the same year and then took it straight away. In terms of cinema admissions in the UK, it was the 19th most seen film of the 20th century.
Wow.
In the UK.
God.
With over 14 million ticket sales. And then one last thing, awards. So for the BAFTAs, obviously, we love our own British films.
Yes, we do.
12 nominations. It won Best Film, beating Titanic.
Oh, wow.
Robert Carlyle, actor. Supporting actor for Tom Wilkinson. Maybe should have been Mark Addy, but Mark Addy was nominated, as was the screenplay, the editing, the sound, the music, and the director. It was nominated for the Comedy Musical Best Film at the Golden Globes. It won the Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Ensemble Cast and Oscars, bearing in mind how small this film is, from the north of England. Nominee for Best Picture.
Wow.
Best Director, Best Screenplay, and Music, which it won. And bearing in mind, this was 97, so competing against the likes of Titanic and James Cameron, Good Will Hunting, As Good as It Gets, LA Confidential, Boogie Nights. This film is a massive British success story.
I didn't know any of that.
And everyone needs to see it. I absolutely suggest you watch it next week and report back.
I will try to do that. It's been on my periphery for years.
Oh, it's brilliant.
I just never got around to seeing it.
Well, now is the time.
I will just have to see it now. It's such a good recommendation. I just have to go and watch it.
So yeah.
Okay.
That's The Full Monty for you.
Well, my first one is on a completely different tack altogether. My first film is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
When you said Jack Nicholson,
yeah,
I thought that might be what you got.
Yeah, there's only really that one role that you're gonna go, He's done a lot of good stuff, but this is the one that really is up there. So One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest came out in 1975. It was directed by Milos Forman. It won Michael Douglas an Oscar for producing, because he actually took over the producing rights to the film from his dad, Kirk Douglas, who had the rights for years with the intention of playing the main role, and they'd never been able to get it made. And then it got to the point where he was just too old to star in it, and nothing had come of it. So he said, well, Michael Douglas said, can I see if I can do anything with this? And he got it made, and he won an Oscar.
All right.
So One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is set in a mental institution, and Jack Nicholson plays the main character, and he's kind of on the criminal side, and he pleads insanity, and he's admitted to this mental institution, and he rebels against the system basically, and rallies up the patients, and there are a lot of moments in it that are jovial, and it's got that, but there's a lot of dark stuff in it, really dark stuff in it. The background characters that you see in this, there's Danny DeVito, one of his first films. Christopher Lloyd's in it as well.
Yes.
So there's all these people in it, but really this is Jack Nicholson's show. Like, without a doubt. He literally gives the performance of a lifetime in this. And he is up against Louise Fletcher's Nurse Ratched, who has gone down as a character in history, one of those evil, like,
they call
she's
her
just
one of
a
the
bitch.
worst.
Yeah, she is just...
Like, to put her on a list with Darth Vader and things like that, is a bit unusual, isn't it?
It is, because when you think evil, you think the worst and fantastical and all this, but what she does is more on a humane level, which in a way is even worse.
Yeah,
because she's doing things that she has the power to control. She doesn't have to do, and she does them anyway, and she does it with this calm. It's infuriating to watch, because you just want to shake her. She's just awful. And she actually went on to win an Oscar as well for this. And Jack Nicholson, obviously, he won one of his Oscars for this. He's got 3 Oscars, I think. But he went on to win one for this. There aren't many mental institution films, really. But this is the whole thing. It's all set in there, and it really highlights what it was like to be in a mental institution, and almost the rights that you don't have. It takes a lot of away, your individuality, even, especially in this particular film. Nurse Ratched really does control everything. There is no personality. She doesn't look at them as people, as individual people, and it does highlight a lot of things about mental institutions, especially at the time. Obviously, a lot of them will have changed now and won't be anything like that today. But obviously, this came out in 1975, so the likelihood was it was very much probably like that. And my mum really likes this because she is a nurse herself, and she does. I think she has a pull towards medical films anyway. And obviously, being a fan of Jack Nicholson, this was a huge pull to her. But she likes things that are inspiring to her, and I can't go into why there are inspiring parts in this, but the ending for her is really powerful. And I don't want to give anything away, so I won't go into it. But that it's got one of those endings that it's just like fist in the air, kind of yes. And she loves films like that. She loves a really good character to hate. She loves a character you hate.
Yeah, there's something about that, though, isn't there? We all kind of like to hate somebody.
Yeah, and she loves characters like that. So Nurse Ratched is one for her, and she likes Jack Nicholson anyway. So that's a big pull for her. It's got that medical pull for her. I think it's very much character based. It's a very character driven movie. On the whole. But it's just one that I think everybody should see, not only because of the subject matter, which is very serious. There's a lot. I mean, Jack Nicholson, he is a very cheeky character. In most of his films, he has that cheeky grin and does have a lot of scenes that would make you laugh. But the actual themes of this are very, very serious.
Well, one of the things that I remember, there's times where you feel a bit uncomfortable, like, they're all been given the pills, and then a lot later on, like, it does kind of turn into a bit of a horror film because of all the electroconvulsive therapy and those kind of things. It's quite frightening. And I was just thinking in my head, my mum likes Girl Interrupted, which is, I don't know if she's seen this, but I think maybe she would like this as well.
It brings up whether the treatments are questionable. So everyone should see it for that alone, really. But it's just got an absolute killer performance. I would definitely recommend that for anybody.
Yeah, I like that film. It's good. So there's our first 2 films down. Now the next 2 are the ones we've told each other.
Yes.
I watched your recommendation this morning.
Did you?
Yes, nearly destroyed me. Right. So, the next film that my mum recommended to me sort of falls into the drama side of things. Is The Colour Purple. 1985. One of Spielberg's first serious films, really.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't know he did it.
No.
I think they go, Steven Spielberg. Because it's just, at the time he was making those, it was like E.T. time and Indiana Jones, and you just wouldn't think he'd make that then.
Yeah. It's not an easy film to summarise, I've found.
It's not.
It's based on the novel by Alice Walker, But in terms of like the span of this film, it begins at the turn of the 20th century, and it goes over like nearly 40 years in the life of Seeley, who's the main character.
I love a movie like that.
Do you?
Yeah, I love a movie that spans a huge amount of time. So that's a real pull for me.
I've got absolutely no problem with that at all. There's some things I'll say towards the end that I did struggle with
Yeah.
this one. I had seen it before. So we start in 1909. We sort of jump almost straight into it. We know there's two sisters. One of them's pregnant. They're only about 14 years old.
Yeah.
And then almost straight away, like 5 minutes into the film, she's giving birth, and her sister's like delivering the child. And then next minute, their father walks in, takes the baby, and that's it. You don't see her again. So it's like, okay. Instantly, I'm like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, you do actually find out as well quite early on, which is horrific, is that it's the father's baby.
It's his, yeah. And that he's likely selling the children, or he's trading, or
yeah.
So it's quite a bleak opener, really.
Yeah.
And then essentially what happens is that Seeley, one of the sisters, is almost sort of just given away to a man called Albert, who lives in their community, who's a widowed father of several bratty kids, and she becomes his wife. But
he is a monster.
yeah,
he's a monster.
She just loses all sense of self, really.
And she didn't have a lot to begin with.
No, exactly. So it's not going well. He's abusive. He threatens her. He beats her. He rapes her. She's as oppressed as can be. In fact, some of the most brutal and challenging or difficult to watch scenes in the film happen in this sort of first section, I think. The other sister turns up at the house as well at one point and stays there for some time.
Yeah, teaches her to read.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah.
There's just sort of a sense that these two children, effectively, are just clinging on to any sense of childhood and innocence that they've got left. And then one of the hardest scenes for me is when they're sort of torn apart. If anything, I'll say this now, I was going to mention it later, but I think the performances here in this first part of the film were much more impressive than the ones that came later.
Well, this sets you up, doesn't it? It sets you up. Seeley only has one love, and that's her sister. Her sister teaches her to read because her sister's more privileged. Her sister is the one who got to go to school, and she teaches Seeley what she knows. But you do see that Seeley's got the back end of the situation.
She's always called ugly as well, isn't she? She's just seen as the not pretty one.
Yeah, and she's just, she's got a hard life. She's going to have a hard life, and there's absolutely nothing that can get her out of that except her sister. That's the only thing that brings her joy, and then they get separated. So they're right there in that beginning. It sets up the entire story. Seeley her character's taken away from her. She's driven down to just submissive behavior, not to speak, not to do anything. She's terrified of getting beaten, so she has nothing left by that point. So it sets up who she is as a character and why. I think it's a really powerful film, especially that opening. Yeah.
So obviously that we jump forwards and see the rest of her life.
Yeah, she becomes Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah, in her first film role. Am I wrong in saying that?
Yeah, I think that's
which
right.
Is pretty impressive.
I know, it's a good way to start.
So it jumps to sort of 1916, and she's now like a young adult. But like you say, she's invisible and voiceless. In fact, we only really hear her speak in voiceover, and that's in her prayers, really. And she covers her face. She doesn't let herself laugh or smile or be seen to be anything other than having no identity. And people refer to her as Albert's maid. Like no one ever refers to her as as his wife. Her only purpose is to serve him, to sew his clothes, cook for him, clean his house. And she's just sort of stopped fighting and standing up for herself.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no fight in her at all.
No. And in the background, all that's in her head is the hope that her sister is okay and alive, and that her children, because she had two,
she did,
are somehow out there and alive and living a better life than her as well. But this is now where I say but. The rest of the film is very different. The rest of it, is it just me, or it's kind of quite a funny film?
Yeah, there
I
are
remember it
parts in
being
it.
quite funny.
Yeah, there are parts in it that it does lighten a little bit. It's almost like an anthology because
Yeah,
it
absolutely. Yeah.
introduces characters and then you see parts of their story, and then and obviously because you're going across time,
Mm.
you see obviously them grow older as well, and some of them disappear and some of them don't, and you
And
can
then they
see
come back again.
yeah, and you can see the effect of them on Seeley, and yeah, each person that comes into it, the not all of them because some of them are less important, but you've got Oprah Winfrey in there. She plays Sophia, and she's a big ballsy character, but you see
Yeah.
kind of her arc as well. So it's
Yeah.
almost like an anthology in parts because some of parts are more serious and then some aren't, and you're seeing where everybody's arc goes. But it's really, I think, the one that probably has the biggest effect on Seeley is Shug Avery, played
Yeah.
by Margaret Avery.
Margaret Avery. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's sort of like I couldn't quite place exactly, like she was a friend of the family. She said at one point, and then she's in a relationship with Albert.
Yeah, I think she's a singer or something, an
She's just a
entertainer.
singer. Yeah.
Yeah, an
Yeah.
entertainer who Albert, played by Danny Glover.
Of course.
I
Yeah.
don't know if we mentioned Danny Glover, but my God,
No,
he
sorry, I
puts on a
forgot.
hell of a performance in this. And he's infatuated with her.
Yeah, he says she
And
should have been your mama.
yeah, and
to her kids.
just brings her into the house while he's having this like kind of relationship with her on and off.
Yeah.
But Shug actually ends up having a really strong relationship with Celie and having a really big effect on her, and even Sophia to a point. Change what her life's going to be. They give her a little bit of fight, and you don't see it straight away. But my favorite scene in the film is at the table when they're all there,
towards the end. Yeah.
and she finally snaps, and it is fantastic.
Ultimately, Whoopi Goldberg doesn't get a lot to do
No,
in the
she
film,
doesn't.
really.
She's observing everybody else. That's the
Yeah.
thing. You watch her observing everybody else's life. And just kind of going along, she just goes like, and you kind of forget. But in this scene, you see what she's actually achieved.
Yeah.
She's become a person. She's got some fight. She's actually does have a personality. She is an individual, and she comes back to this, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, one thing I thought in my head, I still don't understand the significance of the title, but actually they do refer to it in the film. So she's walking through a field with Shug towards the end, and Shug says to her, "It pisses God off if you walk past the color purple in a field and don't notice it."
Yeah.
And Celie mentions it's just trying to be loved, and I guess it sums up the film.
Yeah.
In its entirety, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the scenes that I really like in a way because it has a parallel. Early on in the film, as a child, she is asked to shave Albert on his front porch, and she is so frightened to cut him. But when you jump forward more towards the end, as an adult, she's desperate to cut him. There's something very clever about that, and it's the same setup. She's not moved for nearly 40 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think The Colour Purple is an extremely underrated movie. I really do.
It doesn't get talked
the
about.
book is fantastic as well. I actually studied the book doing English lit at college.
Oh, right. Okay.
And that's I'd already heard the name but never seen the film, and that's when I first saw it. But I really enjoyed it. I like I said, I love anything that spans an amount of time and you watch the characters grow. I love films like that. It's a real pull for me. But I think it's very unfair. A lot of the reason that it was underrated at the time was because of Steven Spielberg. A lot of people were like, "Well, who are you to make this?" He was a genre blockbuster, crowd pleasing director, and I think some people were like, "Well, who are you to make this Southern story? This white man coming in and who's who doesn't even do dramas." And I think that really affected the film and how it did. I
It's
really
a shame,
do.
really. It's a shame because, like, from a filmmaking perspective, the film is perfectly crafted. I've got absolutely no criticisms of how it was made, really, style-wise. I do have criticisms, though. One of them I've already said. The tone of the film, it gets a little bit confusing for me. That there's some parts where it's almost full-on slapstick, So Albert's son Harpo repeatedly, like as a gag, falls through roofs and stuff.
Yeah.
The scenes where Albert's like comically failing to cook Shug breakfast while sort of Seeley pulls up a rocking chair and watches, and he's pouring kerosene into the oven and stuff. And the scenes where later when Sophia's the maid of the mayor, and she's teaching his wife how to drive, and she's just, you could put those scenes in a Buster Keaton film and they would and they would still fit in there. That's quite confusing to me, and I think it was sad really because it kind of didn't do the more tragic scenes justice.
Yeah.
It takes away from a lot of those, and you because you've been taken out of the drama of it all for so long, like the main portion of the film, that by the time it gets to the end you don't necessarily, you've actually quite enjoyed the film because it's been quite funny.
It does try to be a lot of things,
Mm.
and that maybe is its slight downfall.
But then on the other side of things, like you say, it does try to be very emotional, but it's not very subtle
No.
in the way it does it. It's quite melodramatic in that sense. And one thing I read online, I think it was just somebody on IMDb, they said the film was designed to trigger emotions rather than achieve them organically, which I definitely agreed with. It was quite sort of forced, but seeing as this is Mother's Day, my mum, this is the only film I think ever she really talks about, like, she says it makes her cry, like,
Yeah.
so it does. I think it does work at times, but I think those scenes in isolation, especially early on when the two sisters are torn apart, when she finds the letters later on, and then obviously the ending, seems like that in isolation are quite organically dramatic and sad. But the rest of the film, I don't know, it's just a little bit confused.
What would you give it then? What, after you watched it, what was your overall thoughts?
Important story, quite unique story. Tonally a little bit confused. Towards the end, a little bit glossed over. The last couple of years in the plot are skipped over a lot faster, so I think pacing sort of suffers a bit towards the end. But I mean, Whoopi Goldberg, as a first film role and as someone who went on to not be well known for doing dramatic performances, that's one hell of a performance. Like I said, from a director's standpoint, it's perfectly made. Like there's nothing wrong with the look or the style of the film. But yeah, I got a very like sort of Driving Miss Daisy feel. Sweeping soundtrack kind of. It felt like a product of the 80s. I guess at the same time as being a timeless film of that subject matter. So yeah, it's hard to pin down. The last thing I'd want to mention is that it's quite famous for receiving 11 Oscar nominations and winning zilch.
Yeah.
Which
I think is a bit unfair, really.
A little bit unfair. You'd think it would have won something.
Timing. I think timing had a big effect on this film.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, that was The Colour Purple.
Okay. Well, my film that you know about as well.
Yes.
Is Patch Adams.
Yeah.
Again, sticking with the medical theme. Patch Adams is one that my mum introduced me to because it had a profound effect on her. She found it extremely inspiring. She thinks Robin Williams in this role is just superb.
He's sensational. Yeah.
It's do you know what? I absolutely love this film. It's tonally, it just walks that line between comedy and drama so well, and I don't think anybody does it better than Robin Williams. They do say that comedians are very good at that, but nobody does it better than Robin Williams. He can do drama so well.
I don't know what it would have been like at the time, but there's something like profoundly quite sad.
Oh God, yeah.
Watching Robin Williams doing that role.
Yeah, knowing what we know now.
Yeah, and I'm sure you'll touch on it now with what happens.
So, and I mean, I obviously will never know, but it might have had an effect on why he took the role. So, what we know now about Robin Williams is that he did suffer with depression. And this character he plays, Hunter Patch Adams, he is a profoundly depressed character who thinks he's going to commit suicide, basically.
Yeah, that's how the film starts, isn't it? He just admits himself to a
facility.
Yeah,
he does. Yeah, and this has a huge impact on his life. He realizes he's not like these people. He does not have the problems that these people have, he can do something about it. And he has an experience with one character in particular that he is actually rooming with, and this particular character does have his issues. I'm not going to reveal it because I just don't want to spoil it. I really don't. But it just has this effect on him that he helped someone.
Yeah, he has the capacity to help.
He wants that. He wants to do that. So he becomes determined to become a doctor.
Yeah.
So he goes to med school, and he's an incredibly intelligent man. Almost without trying, which just really annoys
Philip Seymour Hoffman's character.
It annoys the other people because he's so nice and he does all sorts of other things, yet he's still able to get top marks, and it bothers other people. Philip Seymour Hoffman's really great in this, and Monica Potter as well is really good, but he just this is just Robin Williams. It is just at his best. So he goes to medical school and he starts to help people. He's not supposed to go into the hospitals because you have to be a certain, I think it's like year 3
You've got to be like third year to work with the patients.
He just totally ignores that, and because he's so nice, the nurses just take to him immediately because he's trying to help people.
And they see it working.
And he just wants to help however he can help. And this one scene, it's like an arc that carries on through. But he goes to see this character who everybody's like, oh god, that one.
Don't
we don't
go in
want to
that
go.
room.
Yeah, they don't want to go in there. You don't want to go in there. And it's Peter Coyote, and he's a relatively young man dying of cancer, who's extremely angry at his situation. And is a very difficult patient, and Robin Williams goes in there anyway, and at first has a real hard time. I think he ends up running out the room at the end. But he cracks him eventually. He makes him laugh, and then he's got him. He's got him, and it's just fantastic to see. My favorite scene though is with the elderly lady towards the end and the noodles. That scene, and the music the score for this is just superb.
It is really nice, actually.
It's lovely, and that score accompanied by that scene, it just makes me cry because it's so nice. I think that's why my mum likes it, because it's a really inspiring movie. It's based on a true character. Patch Adams is a real guy. He's got no health insurance. He set up his own hospital. I think
it's just a free hospital.
It's a free hospital. It's the Gesundheit Institute. That's it. It's all about being funny. And he basically this real guy. His philosophy, I suppose you could say, is to cure people with happiness, with laughter. And I can't think of anybody better to do the role for that than Robin Williams, to be honest.
It's a kind of film, I guess, it's enough for him just to sort of let loose, and you can tell that he must have had an absolute blast, improvising so much stuff for the film. But also, as we know from him doing Good Will Hunting and The Fisher King, and
he's a pro.
He is a very good dramatic actor as well, and Mrs. Doubtfire, of course. But as you say, that ethos that, if you can improve the quality of someone's life, that matters even more so than trying to delay death.
Which is more profound now because we know what Robin Williams was going through. But this film has it's got a lot of really serious themes in there. There's one scene in particular which is extremely sad. You said before that it destroyed you. Can you explain that a little bit more?
It was quite an emotional experience this morning. I don't sort of cry at films and stuff, but I think there was 2 or 3 times throughout this that I was like, obviously we won't say exactly what happens in the middle, but it's one of those. It's a character that, a bit like Robin Williams himself, he would do anything to help other people, or to alleviate suffering of other people, to whatever degree, but ultimately the things that they've gone through themselves, and the personal sacrifices that means for them. Properly inspiring. Just to see someone who believes in life without limits, and it's worth breaking the rules sometimes and challenging the status quo.
It inspires you to be different. It's that type of film. You leave it feeling inspired, and I think that's one of the reasons that my mum likes it. And she did use the word inspiring when I spoke to her about all three of the movies that I've picked. That was the word she used. That she is drawn to films that inspire her.
Ah, see there, you pinned it down.
Yes, and obviously there's the medical aspect there for her, because obviously she works so closely in environments like that.
Yeah. Well, again, I don't think my mum's seen this one, but she's a nurse as well.
Oh,
so
recommend it.
So yeah, I watched it this morning and I thought it was brilliant. I don't think she likes Robin Williams that much, but I think she'll be able to
because
look past that this time.
He has, as a character, he has such an effect on everybody else as well. He changes everybody else. Like, however that ends up working out, he does change everyone.
Yeah.
It's just, it's one of those, it's a joy to watch. I think everybody should see.
I couldn't agree with you now on that one. Yeah.
Oh, good. That very rarely happens.
I really liked it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'm pleased.
But I didn't expect the impact I think that it was going to have.
Yeah.
Okay. So on that note, last round of films that we don't know. Here we go. If you were to ask me, what film reminds you of your mum? Even though I hadn't seen this film, this was a new one to me. This is the one I would choose because she's always said that this is one of the best films.
Okay.
This film, I don't think you would have seen it. It's Zulu.
I have seen Zulu, actually.
Have you?
I have seen
thank
Zulu.
God for that.
A very, very, very long time ago, but I have seen it. My dad loves it.
Oh, right. Okay. That's all right then. So, a bit of background for anyone who doesn't know, because I didn't. True story. It's set in January of 1879 in the South African province of Natal during the Anglo-Zulu Wars, and it chronicles essentially the battle of a very small British post called Rorke's Drift, which was being used as a supply station, like a small hospital at the time. It looks like a farm. But it becomes the target of an attack by a horde of 4,000 Zulu warriors who are on their way. So, in terms of characters, you've got Lieutenant Chard, who's played by Stanley Baker, and he assumes command of all the men that just so happen to be in this detachment on a technicality, really, much to the disappointment of Lieutenant Bromhead, who is Michael Caine in his first major film role.
Yeah.
And they both have very different sort of strategies in mind of how to respond. But ultimately, they realise that they can't outrun the Zulu army, so they have to cooperate and defend the post. And that's pretty much the setup of the film. And I think it would be this simple. However, the British soldiers are massively outnumbered, so there's only about 140 of them, many of whom are wounded and unable to fight. So 4,000 versus 140. Yeah.
Yeah. Not good odds.
Not really. Contrary to what I expected, this is actually a really straightforward story. It was easy to think that this would have spanned several years, and I don't know. But it focuses on a very small geographical area. I think it's only about 50 by 30 meters long, this station, and over a limited period of time, so it takes place over the 12 hours of combat that follow, as these men try to defend Rorke's Drift from the ambush of Zulu warriors who sort of attack them in waves and from all angles, and not just with spears, but they've also picked the rifles off the bodies of the 1,000 men that they've also just massacred nearby. So what I liked about this, though, is that you get to know that location and you get to know certain people in the company as well. So whether it's the wounded people in the hospital bay or the cook, members of the choir or the bugle player, and they're all quite sort of good-humoured, banterous, jolly good fun to be around, actually.
It strikes me, this film, even though it's set obviously in a foreign area, a foreign place, but this film strikes me as being quintessentially British.
It is, yeah.
It's just got that, like that old school Sunday afternoon movie that you would watch that's just British.
Yeah.
And it's quite nice and cozy that way, despite what the film is and about. It's just one of those that you would just want to watch on a Sunday afternoon.
But yeah, it's funny you say that. There is a lot of conflict and carnage as the film goes on.
Oh yeah.
But it does an amazing job of staging some quite long, continuous scenes of battle, which are quite complicated in a way because the commanding officers are having to change their tactic continually depending on what the Zulus around them are doing. And even at one point, those that are bound to the hospital or have been shot and they're injured on the ground are actually having to play their part as well in defending the perimeter.
Yeah.
Some of the special effects, although the fighting itself is quite gentle and tame to what we'd expect nowadays, but for example, like the stabbing,
Yeah.
I don't know how they did it, but the effect of spear penetrating flesh is strangely realistic.
Yeah.
And there's a scene as well where the hospital is on fire, and you really believe it's happening, and you feel the claustrophobia of it
Yeah.
all. And from that perspective, I thought it was actually really, really, really clever. And on the flip side, and I should say this is what my mum always says is the thing that she remembers, that the thing that sort of gives her goosebumps, is
Yeah.
earlier on before the Zulu army appear, and it's deadly silent, and they're just all lined up on the front line, and the camera's panning across them, and then you start to hear the banging of the shields. You can't see them, but you can hear them.
Yeah.
As they march towards them, and it's extremely unnerving.
Yeah.
So really good use of sound in the film, I have to say.
It's funny really, because like for me personally anyway, when I look back on it now, I think about Michael Caine,
Yeah.
who at the time this wasn't his movie. When you actually look at it now, it's Michael Caine you think back on, but he was just the supporting player at the time.
Pretty much, yeah. One last thing that I thought of about this is that we said about The Sound of Music in our last episode, another film from the same era, that the combination of location shooting and sort of beautiful natural scenery mixed with the vibrant Technicolor, it's just exquisite to look at. I really wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, it's so colourful. When I think of the film, I think colourful. I think of the colour, it's so bright.
And I guess the production design as well is incredible, and the costumes that go with it. Not just of the the station itself, the buildings and the fences and the stone walls and sandbags and uniforms, but of the other side too. So obviously the more tribal clothing and weaponry are fantastic. It's a very authentic feeling film.
Yeah,
I have to say. Unfortunately, no award success to speak of, but it generally feels like there should have been. And yeah,
I haven't seen it for a very, very long time, and I have thought a few times that it's one I need to come back to.
I didn't
and watch
think you
again.
had seen it, only because it's not a film everybody talks about.
No, it's
apart
just,
from my mum.
It's just one of those classic films, isn't it? That's just there. But yeah, my dad really likes Zulu, so it's been on a few times when I was younger.
Right. But yeah, biggest surprise of the three. Maybe enjoyed it the most out of all of them.
Oh wow!
I'm sure she'll be over the moon that I've said that about this film, because I think she was a bit worried. But she's not very good at describing films. I hope she doesn't mind me saying. The only thing I got told was that it's called Zulu, and there's a bit where you can hear drums, and that's it. She didn't describe anything else to me.
Wow.
So
that's something to go in with.
And then drum roll for the last film from you.
Okay, so everybody I think has seen this film.
Okay.
I think I've ever met anybody that hasn't seen it. My last film is Forrest Gump.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I put that on the front of the episode.
Oh,
I didn't know.
I know you didn't know. I said it was quite fitting. That's why that's what I meant by it. So, Forrest Gump, this film means a lot to me. This film is one I can't remember having not seen. I don't know when the first time I watched it was. I know I was probably too young to watch it, but I didn't understand the themes in it at the time. Again, you follow him over life. So I've always liked films like that. So I didn't always understand the themes in it, but I've always enjoyed it. And again, it was introduced by my mum. I have great taste in movies as far as I'm concerned, in my humble opinion. And a lot of that comes from my mum. She's introduced me to most of the films that made up my being, really, as a child, and shaped my film watching. And this is a huge, huge part of that. So Forrest Gump, if anybody doesn't know,
I've only seen it once. So
have you? Oh, you need to see it again, Matt. You have to go back and see it.
I didn't watch it that long ago, really.
Oh, I just love this film. So Forrest Gump came out in 1994. It stars Tom Hanks in, I think, probably the best film he's ever been in, and it's just, I think it sums up his career. You might not agree, but I think when people think about him, I think they think Forrest Gump.
Yeah, I think it's the popular film to think of.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think when you think Tom Hanks, you see Forrest Gump, and it was made by Robert Zemeckis, which probably most famous for making Back to the Future. And it's just fabulous. So it's about a man who is sat on a bench waiting for a bus, and he delivers his life story to whoever is sat next to him
Yeah.
at the time. And it starts off from when he's a young boy in Alabama, and you find out that he's got quite a low IQ. So he's got a different way of looking at the world than the rest of us, because he doesn't understand it the same way the rest of us do.
Yeah.
So it takes us through a whole section of American history. So you see the presidencies of Kennedy, Johnson, you see Vietnam, Watergate, all of these historical things, and some of them they just pop in and out. Like you're like, oh my god,
And he just
it's
happened
like
to be there.
he just happened to be there, or
Yeah.
he heard about it, or he saw on the news or something. And there's huge historical things. So there's a lot in there. I think it's very clever.
That's the bigger draw to me to this film. I'm more drawn to it because I like the way it's woven in
with history.
It's like a history lesson.
Yeah, it is. This is just fabulous. I love the fact that it's got this overarching story that covers so much time, and it's only as you get older and you hear more. Like obviously, I didn't know any of the American history as a kid. I just watched it because I enjoyed it and I liked Tom Hanks in it. But when you actually watch it as an adult and you're seeing all the events that are being like shown in it, you're like, oh my god. The technology in this film, like it puts him in there with John Lennon, with Robert Kennedy, with Nixon. And they've made it look so seamless as well. They've used archival footage, and just put him in there, and it's so clever. It's so cleverly done. Robert Zemeckis is known for pushing boundaries on technology, and this was such a subtle but clever way of doing it. This has got some fantastic performances in it. So Tom Hanks won his second consecutive Oscar. He won the first for Philadelphia the year before. But yeah, this has got Sally Field in it playing Forrest Gump's mother, even though she's only a couple of years older than Tom Hanks. But she is fabulous. The way that she explains things to him so that he understands them. I mean, everybody knows the life is like a box of chocolates line.
Yeah.
But I love her in this film. She's fantastic. But Robin Wright, she's the real standout, I think. She's got a very subtle performance, I think. But her character, Jenny, is Tom Hanks' best friend. And love of his life, basically. His entire existence revolves around her.
Yeah.
And she's got a very subtle performance. I think such a hard life. She's struggled through a lot. And you see that, but really on like the periphery, you see these scenes and what she's going through, but it's always him really that we're concentrating on.
It's very much his perspective of everything, isn't it? Of the world, of people and events.
She plays a really great part in this.
Yeah.
As does
Gary Sinise.
Gary Sinise, yeah.
Yeah, I liked him.
He has a bloody superb character in this. His arc goes from being this such a patriotic American soldier who wants to fight for his country, and then
becomes the victim of it all.
Through his experiences, he just becomes the forgotten man who's resentful and angry and doesn't stand by anything that the country throws at them, spiels at them.
I think he represents quite a lot of people living in America at that time.
He becomes the cynical guy. And obviously, again, you see it all through Forrest's perception. And he doesn't understand a lot of it. I think that's part of what's so clever is that the character is showing you, but he doesn't understand, but we do.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a clever way of doing it all. But yeah, this I don't. To be honest, I'm not sure why my mum likes it so much. Really, probably for all the reasons that I've just said, the reasons I like it.
There's a lot to like about it.
It's just a high quality film. I think there's everything about it works really well.
Yeah.
The music is just lovely. It's got a great score. its script is superbly written. The performances are fabulous. So it's just a very, very high quality film. And it toes the line between like having comedy moments and very serious dramatic moments in it as well. And I'd say that's probably something that my mum likes as well. I like films like that have the funny moments but then have the very dramatic moments as well.
Well, funnily enough, every film that we've talked about today, we've said exactly the same about. So maybe that's how we can. All mums just like comedy dramas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should say this film won 6 Oscars. And was nominated for another 7. So it was nominated for a lot of Oscars.
Yeah.
But it won Best Picture that year, Best Actor for Tom Hanks, Best Director for Robert Zemeckis, Best Writing, Best Film Editing, and Best Visual Effects. Across the board, people noticed this film.
Fantastic. So just as a recap,
6 very good movies.
So we've had The Full Monty, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The Colour Purple, Patch Adams, Zulu, and Forrest Gump. I think that's a really good selection. Like, I'm actually happy with all of them.
I would recommend every film of those, apart from obviously the one I haven't seen, to anybody to watch.
Me too. Success.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay then. Not that we've not talked about enough films already, but we said we're going to recommend a film as we usually do. But instead we're going to recommend it to our own mother.
Yes. Can I go first with this one?
If you want to, yeah.
Because it does link to one of your films, actually.
Okay.
My mum hasn't seen The Colour Purple.
Right.
And I think she'd really like it.
Fair enough.
Especially for that get your own back scene at the end at the table with the knife.
Oh, yeah.
I think she'd love that. So I'm going to recommend that. In fact, I already have.
Amazing. Very good.
And what's your recommendation then?
Kind of tied into one that I've already mentioned myself, and one that I have spoken about already with my mum. Something that has a lot of parallels with The Full Monty. It's another Yorkshire-based fundraiser film, is what I've written here. But instead of men stripping on stage, it's women stripping down for a calendar. So Calendar Girls is my recommendation.
Has she not seen Calendar Girls?
No, but she knows all about the real story. Like, she's seen that on the news, and she's familiar with all of that.
Oh, I think she'd like that then.
Barely need to describe it really, but I will just for the sake of anyone else if they want to watch it as well. So you've got Dame Helen Mirren and Dame Julie Walters. They play best friends and members of the local Women's Institute in a village called Napely in Yorkshire, which they find to be quite an old-fashioned and dull experience. So they sing Jerusalem every 10 minutes. They have guest speakers come in to talk about vegetables. Most often you see them sniggering or trying to stifle their laughter at the back of the room. But when Julie Walters' character's husband dies from leukemia, and they need to raise more money than their usual annual calendar raises, because usually it's pictures of bridges or churches or something like that. They decide that they're going to break every rule, basically, in the WI and do something, and they're going to do a nude calendar. And needless to say, because of how popular the story is, they do become a bit of a media sensation. But I think it's a genuinely very, very funny film. And I didn't mention it earlier, but again, belongs to that group of small, low-budget British films from the north of England. Julie Walters has some absolutely heartbreaking scenes in this, but again, it's ultimately a very good feel-good film. And it also cast includes my queen, Celia Imrie, and Penelope Wilton, both who you see later in films like The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, etc., etc. So we've already talked about it. It's on my shelf. Just help yourself, Calendar Girls, and let me know. We're going to need considerably bigger buns.
Okay, so just to end on some news and trailers. There really isn't any at the moment.
Lack of.
We obviously are in really turbulent times at the moment with the coronavirus. So all of the cinemas in the UK have closed, rightly so. And we haven't had any new trailers this week because
not a single one.
Yeah, we don't actually know when we're going to come through this and when things will be coming out and we'll get back to normality. So there isn't actually anything to tell you about. That kind of is the news, really. That there isn't anything. Obviously, Netflix and other apps like that are going to be providing for people. I think a few films have made the decision to come out on those services and come out early. But yeah, we're in very uncertain times at the moment.
Yeah, it's never happened
No,
before.
this is
We don't think it's ever
unprecedented.
happened. But if you did want to go and have a look at some of the trailers that did manage to come out in time, you can look on the CineChat website where we have our trailer chat section. Most recently, we did the upcoming animated Scooby-Doo film, Scoob, Antebellum, Black Widow, Jungle Cruise, Soul, things like that. Which, they will be out at some point. So
eventually, we will get to them.
Do have a look at that.
So where can they find us, Matt?
Well, as I said, you can find us on our website, www.cinechat.co.uk/podcast, as well as our reviews and everything else are on that website. On social media, incorporating Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, and iTunes, just search CineChat Podcast, CineChat Pod, or CineChat_official, and you can email us at
podcast@cinechat.co.uk.
Yay! Oh, it feels like quite a bleak ending to the episode.
It does. It does.
Sad.
I think obviously everybody's uncertain about where we are at the moment, and I think for a lot of people, those who are self-isolating already, your one positive is you've got a lot of time to catch up on those movies you haven't seen.
I thought you were going to say a lot of time to listen to our podcast.
Well, that too.
That as well.
You can listen to our podcast and get lots of recommendations.
So, not trying to compare anything to a sinking ship, but in our next episode, we will be venturing onto the Titanic.
Yes, I've been waiting for this.
This is your choice film from April.
This is my choice. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how we're going to approach this because there's surely nothing that you don't already know about this.
Yeah, spoiler: the ship sank. But yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait for this.
Yeah, we'll find some interesting angles to research and look at things, and we'll report back with our findings. And I'm sure someone will get quizzed.
Oh yeah,
Somebody.
definitely.
Keep your eyes peeled. But in the meantime, thank you for listening. Happy Mother's Day. Thank you for our recommendations. And goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.